So I wanted to turn it over to anybody else who wanted to talk about what their thoughts are, what your suggestions are, how it's affecting you. Just kind of have a
Okay, I think I'm
discussion,
gonna
a
go
free
and
for all.
sit in this. I think I'm gonna actually go and sit in
And
this car
somebody's making a
because
lot of
that's the
noise in their
closest thing
background.
that I probably should get.
So mute yourselves to
Talking
help us all
shit, they
out.
just call
There
it
we go.
participation.
If there's noise in your background. And I'd kind of like to put
So
Kathy and Audra on the spot.
I'm
I'm looking
being
at the
put on the
screen and you're
spot, so I'd like to
obviously
go now. I don't want to
people
hang
of
up on you,
color.
but bye.
And so in the name of respecting people of color, uh, especially I want to hear from the two of you so you know that you're welcome to speak.
Audra, do you want to go first?
Audra, if you do want to talk, you're muted on your end. Why don't you launch it, Kathy, because she might be doing the dishes or something.
Okay. And I am put on the spot here. And I have been very affected by everything that's happened. And even as I've lived in this skin for over 65 years, so it's not like I'm not familiar with racism, but I have to say I've been learning a whole lot recently, and I didn't have the words to even know exactly some of the things I've been through recently. And so now I have some words, and if I could share just a couple of them, is that I attended a forum at the Democratic Women's Club, and this gal next to me, there was dialogue at the table, and there was some talk about what people might say is reverse discrimination or whatever, and she said that that was not racism because racism includes power, that you can have people, even minorities, not being fair to each other, but that's not racism because racism includes power, that there is a majority that has power over another. So it can't be that because a black doesn't like a black, or an Asian doesn't like a black, or a white doesn't like, it has to do with power balance. So I think that that's the first thing when you talk about this new thing called systemic racism. And again, that's not a term that I'd ever heard. I really didn't understand it. When somebody says it, I understand it, but I actually did not think about it in that way. And I think even at the first go around, we have to be willing to talk about this. I mean, sometimes I feel like I can't even talk about the topic because if I say white folks, then people get offended. But we can say black folks, or we can say brown folks, but somehow if we even start talking about it in terms of skin color, somehow that's offensive. So how can we talk about this thing if we all don't feel comfortable talking about it? And that, I think, is the first step, is that it doesn't mean it's divisive. It means this is the way we're going to start healing, because I absolutely believe this, that if we know that racism is about power, the minorities cannot do this by themselves. It can't, because if that group of people doesn't have power, we need white folks. There's no way that you can change systemic racism without both parties doing something, and especially the people that have the power. So, this is just some revelations I've been having, because I have been really, really thinking about this, guys. I mean, really, it's been very personal and sort of overwhelming. And I've had to kind of sort out, what does this thing, systemic racism, mean? How do we see it? How do we reverse it? It's not about band-aids. It's not about getting a few more rules to follow, because it's systemic. We have to be able to grapple with it at a different level. So that's all I want to say. That thank you for bringing up this topic. Really, it's so sensitive that sometimes I'm afraid to even talk about it.
So Kathy, do you have any hopes or suggestions on how you think California or Monterey County or the City of Marina should approach it? in the next months? Do nothing, do a whole bunch? What would you like to see?
Well, I think everybody, well, let me put it this way, that even with real good friends of mine, the whole topic is sensitive. And even when I know that my friends are not racist, it's a hard thing to talk about. And I don't think that we can grapple with this as individuals. I think we have to start with the premise that we want to minimize systemic racism and go from that point, and then look at it really from our institutions and our systems. Are there in key places of decision making, are there minorities reflected in the membership that reflect the population of Marina, for example? I mean, that doesn't mean that we're going to have to struggle with conversations about racism and, as individuals. It means that we're going to look at things that the institution promotes that we can do something about. And so that's kind of the focus, not so much, on let's all have some sensitivity training on racism, for example, because I think that, that is going to take so long, individual by individual. So we have to kind of look at systemic issues. And that's a conversation that I think we need to have as a city, and so I hope that we can have a conversation like that. I don't know in what form, but and I don't want it to be attacking people or people accusing each other of being racist, or I mean, I don't want that to happen.
Well, it's a novel topic to be discussed amongst a miscellaneous group of people, even like those of us on this town hall. And in a public meeting, it's also a very sensitive topic because it's not something that the public usually gets together and talks about. And when they do it on social media, it can go awry very quickly. Audra, did you have anything that you'd like to say about this whole topic of George Floyd and protests and what you would like to see happen as a result?
So I'm just gonna say I am sorry I wasn't able to speak earlier. It takes a lot to do what I do, rebroadcasting your Zoom meeting to Facebook, so I didn't have a camera or a mic on. And so, hi Facebook, everybody, we're on live.
Thank you, Audra.
And I wasn't expecting to so thank you for extending your platform to me, Mr. Mayor. I do appreciate it. I wasn't prepared to say anything. I'm just here to provide a service, I think. We have a lot going on in our city that does need to be, I think, on the table with respect to opportunities that brown and Black folks have, especially some that are in greater levels of poverty, and with respect to protests and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and my son and daughter and people that look like me and sound like me.
And your uncle?
We've got a lot going on, yeah. And so, and I'm quite frankly, honestly, really not prepared for this. I've been in back-to-back meetings for, it seems like days now, and I'm kind of zoomed out. And I did want to just pop in and say, yes, thank you for this platform. Please extend it to me again. And I promise to be more prepared to speak to this topic. Right now, I am emotional wreck. Hi. And
all right.
Thanks, Marina.
Well,
have a good one.
So Audra, if you stay with us, if you listen and anything sparks your interest to say anything, just raise your hand and we'll get you back on. So let's open it up to anybody else that has thoughts that you'd like to share. And yeah. Go ahead, Karen.
I wanted to say that the city of Oakland, when I lived up in the East Bay.
Excuse me, Karen, somebody's got some shuffling going on. So
I
I'm
know
going
I
to go
can-
ahead. I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody just for that reason. And then Karen, I'll bring you back
Okay.
on. Go ahead, Karen.
Thank you. I used to live in the East Bay, so my cities were Richmond and Oakland that I was in all the time. And so, we had some issues up there regarding use of force by the police department. So one of them, I've been trying to find the historical data to verify which one it was, but one of the police chiefs told the force that as far as he was concerned, every bullet in their weapons had their own name on it, and that they should consider that whenever they took their weapon out and whenever they realized they were may have to use it. And it really changed things a lot. And we don't have problems like that here, and at least not in Marina, but I think nearby. And so I just wanted to say that this was a very effective notice from the top to the rank and file of the police departments up there.
So can you explain that again? I wasn't sure if that was a super bad thing or a good thing, the way you said it. I didn't understand.
What had been super bad was that too many police officers were killing people. There's some big examples of like the killing at the Fruitvale BART station at New Year's a few years ago. And so the way the police chief from the top changed that culture in the police department was to say that as far as he was concerned, every police officer with a gun, with a bullet, with bullets in it, that everybody's bullets had their own names on them, that they were responsible, for their actions. And it made a big difference. So it was a cultural shift that in that case came from the top and of the police department. So that's what I wanted to throw out there. It's not impossible to change police departments. So
our police chief was sort of brought herself to tears last week when she was on our town hall. And then she spoke at the Black Lives Matter rally in Vince DiMaggio Park on Saturday. And when she spoke, she again brought herself to tears. And so the heartfelt expressions that the heartfelt sentiments that she has shared on those occasions and maybe other occasions, I'm glad that we have a police chief that really cares about all this. And she has some personal experiences where she's not, where she herself is not immune to the oppression that can result when we have racist, behaviors. So it's nice to know we have a police chief that I think sees it the way that most people do who are looking for improvements. But Marina's not without its issues. And so hopefully we can address them, and that's partly why we're talking about it tonight, and hopefully we'll have some more talking about it tomorrow during the city council meeting. Thanks, Karen, for your thoughts. Anybody else want to talk about this? How about Mark and Kat Deer? I think they want to talk about it. You guys can protect each other.
We like Marina a lot. We've been here about 4 years, and we like the fact that it's diversified. Our family is really, everybody's in our family. And we just had, my oldest son just had his first child after 9 years of marriage, and he's Chinese American. And so we just have everybody in our family, and this affects everybody. And it's been hard.
What's been one of the hardest parts about it for your family or for you?
I think we have, Kat has a cousin on her side that is interracial marriage, black and white, and he's actually her son is a very well-known basketball player, and they're very lucky because they're able to do things of kind of get away with not things, but just be able to do things that other people can't. That we see of color. That we have friends of ours that live in Northern California that don't want to leave their house. They're scared because they're of color, and yeah, they live in this. That's where we came from. Was the Sacramento area, and it was very non-diversified. It was very white. I can't imagine if you were black, you'd be scared to be there. And it's sad to have that in California, to think about one of the most liberal states in the union, to have this fear of being black and having to walk outside and not be able to do the other things that everybody else can do.
I think the hardest.
Can't hear you, Kat. I'm sorry.
My friend's coming to terms with the fact that this is California and she's been here all of her life. I've known her since 3rd grade. And she's finding out that, this is her state, this is her area, and she feels like she can't go out. She feels threatened. It's so sad.
Does she, your friend, and Mark, your cousin, who's African American and not comfortable going outside, do you know if those two individuals feel bolstered or supported by what's going on? Does it give them strength, or does it give them courage, to go out or not?
I would say they're scared to go outside because of what is going on, and right now, because there's nothing been finalized with this. It's infant stage. We're still crawling with it. We haven't fixed anything. There's nothing that said this is now okay. And it's sad, because why is it okay for someone to be black when you're a human being? That's the way it should be looked at. We're all human beings. We all need to get along. We all need to do this as human race, not because you're black, you're white, you're Chinese, whatever you are. It doesn't matter. You're all human beings, and we look at it that way. We feel comfortable with everybody, but we've seen it in real time that says, yeah, you're not welcome because you're a different color, you're gay, or you're whatever you are. And it's like, that's not fair. That's why does it matter what you are, what color you are, whatever? It should be, you all have equal say. And it really disappoints me that we've gone through the 60s and hopefully we've started to get things going, and we're already back to the 60s and probably now back to the 50s because of the way politics have played out. And I think it's very sad that we have to go back and rework this again and not go forward. We keep going backwards.
Laura Hoover, if you're able to talk, you worked a lot with businesses over the last several months, and especially businesses that are struggling. Can you tell us what your sense is about the business world, particularly business people of color? And I've heard that there's some Asian backlash, because some people refer to it as a virus, COVID, from a certain place, that there's increased prejudice against Asians. And Laura, maybe you're not going to come on because maybe you're doing the dishes or making dinner or something. Kathy, you've worked with the businesses quite a bit. What kind of comments have you heard about people of color running businesses and how this might have affected them, even before the George Floyd protests, but just during COVID? You're muted, Kathy. Well, maybe that's my fault. I'm sorry. Okay, Kathy, go ahead.
That's a hard one. We have so many immigrant, ethnic, mom and pop restaurants here, and I think it's the charm of our city. I honestly, because of the makeup, and I'm not denying that there is systemic racism going on in our local government, for example, but in terms of the treatment of the the ethnic minority, and they're actually maybe not minority is a good word, but I think that they have felt real genuine support from all of our community. I feel like that. I haven't heard anything. Now, sometimes when there's sort of this inference from other places of this is the Wuhan virus or about the economic relationships, I think Asians are scared. And during the past few months, I know that I heard that from some Asian businessmen that they felt that there might be a backlash. And we saw this happen, that it doesn't matter if I'm Japanese or Chinese or, Thai, it's sort of categorized as Asians. And so we all are targeted essentially. So I think that was happening before, maybe about a year ago, when there was sort of, this economic pushback against China, for example. Then people started getting afraid, and actually people where I've heard of an incident where a customer was very nasty to a Chinese person, so a business person. So some of that has, but for COVID, I don't feel that about the COVID issue. I think our community came together.
What I was thinking when I was thinking of COVID is that two immigrant business owners who run restaurants told me that they've had people get really angry when asked to wear a mask, where the business owner is trying to comply with the rules because they think they're supposed to tell people, because they kind of are, but then certain people take it out on them. And I think that there might be some racism behind that, but I don't know because I wasn't there. So that's what I was thinking, that, that was before the George Floyd, when those incidents happened. And I thought maybe that was because they're taking it out on them because they're Asian and they don't want to wear masks, and they're going to take it out on these Asian people because they can, because they see the Asian people as more of a easy victim than somebody that, like a large statured, white male maybe wouldn't be so attacked by somebody that didn't want to wear a mask, but I don't know. That's why I asked you that question.
Yeah, no, I think that I have heard similar things, but I don't know that these were identified and experienced as a racial thing. But I do know that a year ago or so, that people were afraid on the Asian side. But I don't know that.
Okay. Well, what we're doing right now is asking anybody that wants to share their thoughts about the Black Lives Matter movement, about the police brutality, or what they might see as anti-racism, anything that's on your mind. And I think that Caucasians don't have it. They're not getting off scot-free here, because sometimes, if we're Caucasian, we can all be labeled racist. And sometimes if we think that we're being as good as we can to people of color, it's a little bit offensive to be lumped into words like racism and institutional racism, as if all Caucasians were racist bullies. So anyway, any thoughts anybody wants to share before we leave this topic? It'd be great to hear from you now. And just raise your hand and I'll unmute you. Kathy, did you want to say something else?
Yeah, if no one else is speaking,
Okay.
I want to just say that I have in the past few days really done some real soul searching about this. And when I talk about it, I am exhausted, guys. I was just saying today, I don't know why I feel like everything's drained from me. It's not an easy topic. And so when people in this forum, especially when it feels so public, it's hard to talk about. But the more we talk about it, the easier it will get. And the more a solution is in sight. If we don't talk about it, it isn't gonna get better. I guarantee that. So it takes courage to talk about this. It takes a lot of energy. to be open, whether you're a minority or whether you're a white person. It's just a hugely difficult topic. So I hope, you know, as we continue forward, and that people can go ahead and talk about it, because, you know, I fear that I'm going to get attacked for just saying my opinion. I'm sure that all of you, it doesn't matter if you're white or you're black, you're afraid to say anything because you're afraid somebody's going to attack you. And if we're all feeling like we're going to be attacked, we have to say, okay, what is that fear about? You know, and if we are attacked, are there going to be people to help us, to support us and not let us get attacked? I think that's a critical piece in all of this too.
Right. Let's go to Audra and then Karen. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. Thanks again, Mr. Mayor. So just, I think what I'm responding to is this idea that, or the thought of not all white people are racist, I think is kind of this sentiment, and I could be well off, but that's kind of what I heard. And while I understand this to be true, I don't know. I just, okay, so with respect to generational wealth and generational privilege and things that have been handed down for hundreds of years, including generational hatred and dismissiveness, right, of people's pain, and to not be a soundbite, and to yeah. So there's a lot that absolutely needs to be covered. There are people being hung in trees. Black people are being hung in trees in California. My son is Black. My daughters are Black. Yeah. So I have one in Michigan and I have two here with me. Yeah. But we leave outside of Monterey, Salinas, or I'm sorry, Marina, Seaside, or Salinas, and our lives aren't the same. We have to behave differently. Yeah. And we behave differently just walking outside of our doors anyway. Yeah. So we can't pretend like, you know, everything is nice and sweet and kind and lovely and keep smiling the way that we have for hundreds of years, because we need to help you feel comfortable. I think we're tired of help. I am making an I statement here. I'm tired of helping you feel comfortable in your generational wealth and your generational health and right? I'm tired of that. So I would suggest a lot of education needs to happen. And yeah, I'm gonna go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying a lot, Audra. Okay, Karen.
Thank you, Audra. I'm so glad we've had our conversations lately. And this is hard to say, of course. So I have to acknowledge my white privilege, and I have been trying to do this in different places, and I'm getting some really good feedback and changes have been made. And in other cases, I'm having to keep trying to explain it. And I took a pledge the other day that I am a racist, and it was sort of like the AA pledge. I'm a racist, and I'm trying to work out that situation. And so I try to say I'm in a position on the anti-racist spectrum of trying to be more anti-racist, but I'm not there yet. Of course, I'm still learning. The book list is massive, and I'm trying to do those things. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is those of us who can pass as white need to become allies, and is one. And two is we should not be asking the people of color, oh, what book should I be reading? Or what should I be doing? It's like, hello, you're educated or enough, figure it out for yourself. watch the movies, find the books. It's not hard for white people to do it by themselves without adding another burden to people of color.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, Alex. You might be muted.
For hosting these meetings. I think that there's no easy answer to what is essentially centuries of systemic racism and repression that has been propagated throughout this country's history. And there's nothing really that can just cure that overnight. It does take a lot of reflection and examination. I applaud the city in, your attempt to try to at least put on the agenda for tomorrow the study for examining practices of perhaps institutional racism within the city. That is an important step just to see where things can be changed. My big issue is just to say that I really sincerely hope that we take an examination of the role that, policing plays into these issues. That's not to say that, our specific police department or that, Chief Nieto or anything has been doing a poor job. More so that we should just be open towards other ways of doing things, and that the leadership in the city should really just look at what other cities are doing and see how those sorts of new policies that spring from all of these things affect the lives of the people that live in those cities, and see if there are any lessons to be learned here. Like, I know San Francisco has essentially said now that when it comes to responding to calls, police will no longer send armed police to certain emergency calls involving truancy, mental illness, and other types of non-violent, non-threatening incidences. And I think that steps like that can be huge in reducing, the school to prison pipeline, continuing recidivism, all of those issues that contribute to systemic racism and, rampant inequality. And so that's not to say, I have no one real solution to anything. I think no one does, but we need to listen. We need to examine ourselves. And I think that folks need to look at what works to reduce inequality and make life better for everyone. And so thank you for hosting this. Just wanted to throw in my 2 cents there.
Alex, are you a Marina High School graduate? So Alex, I was impressed by what you said. I was trying to fish out, were you a Marina High School graduate?
Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't turn my video
on. Were you
on. Okay. Longtime Marina resident, been involved in politics and such.
Were you the ASB president at the high school?
Yeah, way back when. That was an early part of my career, but certainly, yeah.
And then did you work for Senator Monning's office?
Yes, I'm that Alex, but I'm here between jobs, trying to get into, while I'm here, I have the time to be active in these things. But the point being, I just wanted to kind of express that, and also just thank you for taking leadership. I did see you at the March Saturday, but overall, I just think it takes a lot of discussion and self-reflection to kind of see what can be different, and just want to throw in my 2 cents. But anyways, I'm turning my camera off again.
All right. Yeah, your 2 cents was really special for me to hear, and probably others, as was Kyler's. Anytime we have young people that are so articulate, it gives the rest of us hope and ideas, and we learn from you. So thank you for joining us, Alex. I thought I recognized your voice, but I wasn't sure. Okay, well, I don't see any hands up, so we can move on with our agenda. Thank you for sharing a touchy subject, but like Kathy said, the more we share it, probably the less touchy it's going to get, and maybe the more progress we make together on it. The next thing is talking about last Wednesday's council meeting. It was on cannabis, solely on cannabis. That was the only topic, because it was leftover from what we didn't finish the previous Tuesday. So between the previous Tuesday talking about cannabis and this last Wednesday finishing up, it was 8.5 hours of cannabis discussion to be able to pick 3 applicants out of 5 who made it to the last stage. 4 of the 5 had 100% score, A+, and 1 of the 5 had a 94 point something score. So, low to mid A if you were going to give it a grade. And the voters' ballot measure that passed in 2018 had a maximum of 3 dispensary permits. And these 5 applicants were applying for a conditional use permit to open up a retail dispensary for cannabis, medical, and recreational product. So after 8.5 hours combined between the 2 nights, 3 of the 5 were chosen, and 2 of the 5 that weren't chosen were just stellar teams, organizations. And one of those 5 would have totally revamped that horrific gas station at the entrance to town on Del Monte. So it was like saying no to a great candidate or applicant and saying no to, I don't want to say in our lifetime, but for the next 10 years, we're probably not going to see that gas station go anywhere except ugly. And so, it's great that we picked 3 cannabis applicants, and they deserved it. They were all good proposals, good teams. And one of them, if they open their doors, has to modernize the corner where Mortimer's is, the Mortimer's property itself. And I didn't say it during the meeting, but I thought it would have been great if they just would have called their cannabis dispensary Mortimer's, because it would have been so endearing for so many people that know about Mortimer's history in Marina. They're going to call it Pacific Roots, and that name comes from the old railroad station, so it has some connection to Marina's history. But it's going to be sad if they open their doors and the Mortimer sign comes down, because that's about as iconic as it gets in Marina. Is Mortimer's, and it's kind of it's a bittersweet icon to lose and to keep, but I think that would have been really cool. But we do have 3 cannabis permits now, and one of them is probably going to open lickety split, like within 3 or 4 months, because it's in the old Hollywood Video building, and so all that has to happen is small tenant improvements, move in the product. Whereas the Mortimer's location is going to take a long time, probably just to get a plan that's compliant with our law code, because that property is so out of code right now. So that one's going to take a while. And then the third one is kind of in between. It's taking over where Divas and Kenny's Tattoo is, across the parking lot from Jack in the Box, right next to the courthouse. Kind of I don't want to say hole in the wall, but it's a little tucked away spot, which is probably more appropriate for a hair salon and a tattoo business where you're going to go there because you like Kenny tattoos and you like Divas hairstyling. But as any other kind of retail, it's kind of hidden away. So I'm not sure it's going to do as well as the other 2, which are really out there. But we're joined tonight by Tony, and Tony Raffol is a 50% owner in the chosen applicant on Reservation Road. So out of the 5, Tony, you were the only applicant that was on Reservation Road. The others 4 were adjacent to Del Monte Boulevard. So how are you doing, Tony? And what are your plans and how it's going this week? Are you seeking a building permit already, or what's going on with Element 7, which is the name of your cannabis dispensary expected to open pretty soon? What's going on with that? So Tony, I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but I have you unmuted. Tony, maybe you can't talk because you're video only. So if you can join us some other way, Tony, we would love to hear from you. But while we're waiting to see if you can join us in a way that you can talk, what are anyone else's thoughts moving ahead on cannabis in Marina, or if you attended those meetings or you didn't? What are anyone's thoughts on cannabis businesses in Marina? And you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you. Or actually what I'll do is I'll just unmute everybody. And then if I get a lot of scratchy noises, I'll mute everyone except for the speaker. So if you're muted now, it's probably on your end. But anybody want to talk to cannabis? All right, somebody's very windy, so I'm going to mute everybody. And raise your hand if you want to speak to this matter. And I think we might have someone. So go ahead, Audra. Welcome back. Audra was one of the members who were going to be part owner of one of the two applicants that was not chosen. Go ahead, Audra.
So thank you for setting me up so nicely. I was just wondering if you could speak to some of the reasons why my dispensary wasn't chosen. It truly, it would have changed my life and that for my children, so, and my grandchildren. That generational wealth that I was talking about would have been amazing. So I'm being a little petty maybe by asking, but here I am being petty and asking. I'd like to know.
Yeah. Put me on the spot if I am on the spot. Go ahead and put me on the spot.
I appreciate it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. So, reading between the lines, what wasn't spoken last Wednesday is that all three applicants chosen had strong union support because they had worked with the unions and they had promised and they'd signed agreements for labor peace agreements. And that was brought up, but that wasn't a reason that we could approve or deny anybody. It was just brought up, like a lot of things were brought up. But it is a coincidence. And so, I think that there's a lot to that, even though it wasn't spoken. Had it been spoken, it probably wouldn't have been legal to make a decision based on union involvement. So what was spoken, and that's what we have to go with, is that the Mortimer's location needed improvements, and so it would be in the general welfare of the city to have Mortimer's remodeled. But that logic could have been applied to the gas station, and it wasn't. What was spoken as a reason for denying the gas station was conflict with road changes coming up. But back to your question, Audra, the union issue that wasn't spoken as a reason, I think, was in the background, and I'll never be able to prove it. It wasn't my issue. And then I think the other background issue, which is not a surprise to you, Audra, because you heard so much about it, was an outpouring of support for the current tenant, Michi's Japanese restaurant, Michi's Sushi Japanese restaurant. And that also was not a reason that we could deny your application based on displacement of existing businesses, because if that was a criterion, then we would have had it in the ballot initiative saying we would not allow, or we would score low, cannabis applications that would displace existing businesses. But that wasn't a criterion, and so that would not be legal to be used. But again, I think that was in the background. But all I can tell you, Audra, is what was spoken as reasons of supporting the three. And the Carmel one, the Carmel Avenue Mortimer location, what was spoken was it was going to be great for the city to have that modernized, and that is true. What was spoken about why Stizzy, which is next to the courthouse on Del Monte, why that was picked, and that was picked as the second of the three. First, they picked Element 7 on Reservation Road. So I can go through why they were picked, but your question was why wasn't your project picked? And I've said everything I know about why it wasn't picked. The spoken reasons were not against your project. They were in favor of the others. And so the way it worked out, there were three separate motions. Motion number one was to approve a conditional use permit for Element 7, which was the only one on Reservation Road. And that was, that motion carried, 4-1 with Councilmember O'Connell dissenting, and he dissented on all three motions. and he would have dissented on maybe 100 motions because all along he's been dissenting on the establishment of cannabis because it's a federally illegal drug. And so his bottom line is, as long as it's federally illegal, he doesn't approve of it coming to Marina, which is a logical argument. So we approved Tony's element 7, and then a motion was made to approve Stizzy, which is over by the courthouse. And then a third motion was to approve the Carmel Mortimer's location. And then there was a couple other attempts to deny the remaining 2 and basically make them go away. But we couldn't get, luckily, I think, fortunately, we couldn't get enough votes to deny them. So they're still in the hopper, those other 2. And I think that's meaningful because the Carmel location might not work out. Staff gave some indication that it's going to be extremely difficult to make that Carmel location compliant with city code. And so I think that Adam's hope and my hope is that if that doesn't work out, if one of these 2 who weren't chosen still care enough to be in Marina after being essentially not chosen, then we'd be back to choosing one of those 2. And maybe some of these union issues and other issues will have been resolved by that time, maybe 3, 4, or 5 months down the road. But we'll see. So Audra, that's really all I can tell you about why yours wasn't chosen. And I'm sorry if that's not adequate, but that's really the best I can do. And that's this whole idea about systemic racism and implicit racism. We can be suspicious up and down about that. I think Audra may have been the only African-American person of color on any of the 5 teams, although I'm not sure. Definitely the only one that was a part owner. That would have been a part owner had she been chosen. So that's the kind of thing where, it's not unreasonable to suspect institutional racism, but it's a hidden issue, and that's what makes it so insidious. Go ahead, Audra. I'm trying to unmute you. Go ahead, Audra.
Thank you. I just wanted to jump back on and say thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that very, very lengthy, very compassionate explanation to me with respect to the reasoning behind the decision the council made. I can't imagine that it was an easy one, and I do appreciate you and all the work that you do here in Marina. And just maybe one of the criterions going forward for the next 2 might be that there would be Black ownership in this town with respect to cannabis. And I'm saying that because so many Black people have been affected negatively by the use and the sale of cannabis. And now we're here in this landscape that's dominated by white supremacy, and we're still not getting the opportunities that we deserve. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I promise you I'm not pooping on you, right? I'm just making a statement.
This is what this town hall is all about. Thank you, Audra. And after that decision last Wednesday, somebody asked, do we have any Black restaurant owners? And I think the answer is no. But worse than that, I can't think of a single business in Marina other than a catering business, which I'm not sure if it's still running, called Kona Jerry, where he barbecues for events. He caters events with barbecuing. Kona Jerry, his name is Jerry. He's African American. But I can't think of a business owner in Marina, brick and mortar, who is African American. Can anybody else? It's kind of amazing. There's 900 businesses in Marina, and probably only 20% of those or 30% of those are brick and mortars that we would all recognize. And I just can't think of a brick and mortar in Marina that's owned or managed by an African American. I can think of a lot of other ethnicities, a lot of other races, but I can't come up with one there. And that that was interesting, to say the least. Kind of unsettling. Go ahead, Kathy.
Right, yeah, and I think that has to do with the history too, in terms of, as I understand it, after World War II, what was happening is that the government stationed GIs, Black GIs who married foreign brides in different wars. They stationed them in Seaside, and the American GIs who married Asian war brides, they were stationed in Marina. So there is this strange history that evolved. One, to have so many minorities, either in Seaside or Marina, was not by chance. It was a concerted decision on the military. And then we have this fast forward to current times, that those legacies still are deeply part of the cultures of both Seaside and Marina, I think. Now, maybe Audra can give a little bit more new information, but I think that the Black population in Seaside is still significant. I'm not sure. Maybe he's gone. I'm not sure, but I know that that's the history of the towns.
And it's going down, and the percent of African Americans that make up Seaside's population is going down. And that fact is lamented by remaining African Americans, especially those leaders who have been leaders in Seaside for a long time. They see themselves losing their town, becoming less like them and more like new people who are not like them. Mm. But the remaining Black population has enough leaders in it in Seaside that they still wield a lot of leadership power in Seaside, and they're still very vocal at city council meetings, and they usually have one or more members on city council who are African American. And it's been a while since we've had an African American, Jim Ford, on our city council, and we're not doing very well on our city council in the 21st century as far as diversity on our city council, or diversity in our department heads, or diversity on our planning commission. It doesn't reflect our community, and partly I think that's because, Kathy, you and I have talked about this, a lot of Asian cultures, it's not in their makeup to stick their heads out and stick their necks out and take a leadership role. But I won't speak more to that. But let's go to Tony. And Tony, you're one of the 3 applicants that were chosen, and you're the applicant expected to get your doors open before any others. Can you give us a little bit update about what's going on from your perspective in your business, Element 7?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening. For my business, like in this week, we're gonna apply for the building department approval to start the construction. I was listening to this conversation, and I'm sorry for Audra. Like, I really wish that you guys has been with us, because I was like so surprised by Steezy getting this license. They did not score 100%. About minorities owning part of the dispensaries, my partner Robert, when I signed the agreement or the partnership with him, I signed it with him and his wife, because they both own a company that I partner with them. 50 me and 50 them, and his wife is Black, so she is technically owner of 25% of the dispensary. And I was happy to be partner with this couple. They're very nice people, and they live in Bay Area. And I hope one day, like, we all get to meet. For the future, we have a lot of plans for this city. We're gonna do cultivation, maybe manufacturing. And Audra, we will be so pleased if you wants to join us on any of these future plans. Thank you for listening, and I'm sorry I can't talk too much. I'm at work right now. If you can hear like the background sound noise, and thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you, Tony. And I think
You're
it sounds
welcome.
like you're in a library. It's actually very quiet on your end.
Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you,
in
Tony.
the back, in my office in the back.
Okay. Especially since you're at work, thank you for joining us. It was great to hear your perspective on that. And I appreciate your outreach to Audra. I know that you're a man of your word, and I think something might come of that. Kat, Blair, did you want to say anything? If you do, go ahead, Kat.
Oh, I believe there are a couple businesses in our city that might be owned by people who are African American.
Someone chatted on our chat that the Daryl Shote, who owns the Fort Ord Market on Yimjin Parkway, which is not inside the city of Marina, it's darn close. You could throw a rock into Marina from the market. So technically, he doesn't qualify, but the city is in the process, perhaps, of acquiring that area. So that would definitely bring in an African American business owner. Do you know of any other, Kat?
I think possibly Rooster Games is now owned. It was owned by William, and now it's owned by Dustin.
Oh, I did not know that. So the bike shop in Marina that's near the city hall is called Rooster Wheels, and it has a separate business in the same building called Rooster Games. And Rooster Games is owned by Dustin, who's an African American. And what Kat's telling us is she thinks that perhaps Dustin has purchased Rooster Wheels from its former owner, William Greenbaum.
And I believe also What You Break is owned by Josh, who's African American as well.
What You Break is a great little business. I say little because it's a small square footage business. You can bring your computers, your phones, whatever you break, and they do great work. And is it Justin? What's his name? Kat?
Josh?
Joshua. Yeah, Josh. And his friend Selena, who's establishing her own business out of his storefront, but now she's moving out of there. Yeah, Josh. Great. Yeah, I couldn't tell you if he was 100% African American. He looks like he might have some Islander in him or something. But yeah, that's great. I'm great to hear that. Thanks for bringing that up, Kat. Anyone else? Any other businesses?
I also wanted to mention a program I heard about.
Okay.
In Eugene, Oregon, they have a program called Cahoots, where they divert some of their law enforcement money to go to create a team of medical and crisis counselors and mental health professionals, and they're working as first responders along with the police to address 911 calls, so that it's not always people in uniform that might, for some people, make them more nervous, or it's just something that I heard about that I thought was an interesting way to do public safety, and I thought I'd mention it.
Yeah, that concept is really interesting. So let's say I'm involved in domestic violence with my wife or my girlfriend or my child, and so I call, or someone calls 911. Right now, an officer shows up with a gun and they do their best. And in this model, Kat, it sounds like the officer would still show up because, there could be guns or violence, but there'd also be a second person. And that would be a social expert. And maybe that social expert would take the lead, and that would be really good. And I'm thinking that would be not twice as expensive, but still, you're paying the officer to do what traditionally has been done. And then you're paying another person to show up at the same time. And so to budget for that, in Marina, we would have to take money from the police budget and hire some social expertise, or we have to find another separate pot of money and fund some social expertise so that the officers wouldn't be out of their lane trying to deal with social issues when really they're trained to deal with enforcement issues. So why don't we end this part of our agenda with anybody else that wants to talk about that concept or anything else in this discussion of, well, we started with cannabis, but discussion of either cannabis or the demands by Black Lives Matter protesters that we do something like what Kat was talking about, so that defunding the police means changing their role, changing their funding, whatever it takes to take care of these nonviolent situations better than just by enforcing them. So does anyone have any last words before we move on? You're also respectful and quiet, but I appreciate that. I know that you're listening and that you care. It's just that this is kind of touchy stuff. Okay, so we're going to move on to the COVID update, and we do this by talking about Marina and Monterey County by the numbers. So unfortunately, there was a new death over the weekend in Monterey County, so that brought the deaths of COVID-related illnesses up to 12 in Monterey County. And those 12 families, have experienced tragedy due to COVID. And then there's 440,000 of the rest of us that haven't yet succumbed to it. So there's 12 deaths out of 440,000 people in Monterey County. There's been 995, almost 1,000 positive people in Monterey County that have tested positive for COVID. And there's been almost 15,000 tested. So about 1,000 of the 15,000 tested, which is 6.72%, have tested positive. 12 have tested positive in Marina, 14 in Seaside, 21 in Seaside. 12 in Marina, 21 in Seaside, and 14 in Monterey. There's 8 hospitalizations, which is really interesting because they used to report that number as a cumulative number. And it was up in the 60s, I believe. But that was since March 12th. There had been a cumulative number of 60 people hospitalized in Monterey County. Now it's down to 8. And I'm pretty sure that's a bed count, that the 8 are currently hospitalized in Monterey County. We have up to total of about 1,200 beds in Monterey County that could be used for COVID patients. And so 8 of them right now are being used for COVID patients. So it does not look, unless we get a surge or a second wave in the near future or far future, it doesn't look like we're going to use the alternative care site that was set up for 350 hospital beds in Marina at the Marina Airport. The beds never came, but it was prepared so that the beds could be brought in should they be needed. But it looks like the existing hospital beds are going to be sufficient, and the hospitals will not even have to add more beds, because they do have the option of adding more beds if the need arises. So 8 hospitalizations right now in Monterey County. The good news about that number is that there's a lot more capacity. And so with all these businesses reopening, we expect all these numbers to go up with all the reduced social distancing that's going to be happening in gymnasiums or gyms and bars and restaurants and everything. It seems like besides big concerts, so many things are now allowed once they're able to comply with all the rules that apply to any respective business, that we're going to see a lot more contact, and therefore these illnesses and testing positives and probably the deaths are going to go up. And I suppose if they go up substantially, there'll be some clawback, and we'll regress in our relaxations, and maybe some of these businesses, especially those that are traced to some of the new cases, they might be shut down again as far as that type of business, but we'll see. Does anyone have any comments on these numbers or the status of reopening so many types of businesses, including tattoos and massages and hair salons and barbers? And I'm trying to decide when I'm going to go to get one, because I haven't for, since March, probably before then. But anyone that wants to talk on this issue, just go ahead and raise your hand, and we'd like to hear from you what you think. Town halls are two-way meetings, so. Mike and Cindy, I love to put you on the spot. You've been so quiet tonight, and I know that you have so much thought going on every day, and you probably talk about it at every one of your kitchen table dinners. So tell us.
I'm just a little concerned that we may be moving forward just a little bit too quickly. I know it's a tough call because economically there's a lot of businesses hurting. But, you know, it's out of an abundance of caution, I'm still trying to be very careful.
Yeah, I think it's politics and money, you know, starting with the golf courses long ago, you know, 2-3 months ago, and then construction, you know, the industries that have lobbies, they were open first. That's not a coincidence. And I don't know that the governor can control it anymore. Remember that weekend when everyone went to the beaches in Southern Cal? And then the next week, he punished them by saying in Orange County, the beaches are closed. But I think the door never really shut. And I don't think that it's within anyone's power to shut it as far as the governor. And I was astounded that my housemate, who lives in Sacramento half the time, he came down to visit, and he said that Sacramento has been relaxed for a while, where most people are not wearing masks. They've been in restaurants, dining in for several weeks, way before Monterey. So the governor is speaking from the Capitol and trying to set the tone, but I think it's out of everyone's control. And I had an argument with my friend Kathy, who's on the line right now, and we had different thoughts, and so it sounded like an argument. But if the governor can't control the capital city, and if the county sheriffs in Monterey don't have guidance so that the deputies do anything to enforce masks and lack of social distancing, there's just so many signs to me that this appears to be an uncontrollable situation, Mike. And so those of us who feel the unsafety, I guess we stay home, or we closely monitor our behavior so we're not part of going to the bars and going to the churches and going to those places that are not respecting health considerations. I don't know what else we can do. And I know Kathy is still going to try to do her best to try to make compliance happen where possible, and every little bit will help. But it seems a little bit out of control to me at this point, and I think it got out of control partly out of people's morals and values, those who didn't want to believe in all of this, and then the politics and the money, I think, have taken it from there. So there's some powerful forces, you know, going on right now, Mike, and I think that's what we're looking at. All right, Kathy, I have to hand it over to you.
And, you know, I really believe in everybody's choice. Truly, if they want to expose themselves, you know, whatever, you know, I have no problem with that. But what I really, really am concerned about is that the reopening didn't consider, and I wrote about this on Nextdoor, the folks that have to be waiters and waitresses, because you know, I may choose to stay at home because, you know, my husband's age or whatever, and my diabetes or whatever I want to say. That's my choice. But folks that have to be waiters and waitresses, and I was that when I was younger, and we don't make a lot of money, and we don't have health insurance. And so when you go to a restaurant and they're wearing a mask to protect you, then you should be wearing a mask to protect them. The mask isn't for you, it's for other people. And so that's what really gets me. And so I get see safe practices, you know, whether it's at Home Depot or Michael's or Kohl's, that I'm okay with, but not when these poor folks have to serve you, break the distance, and, you know, to serve you, to take your money, bring your water or whatever, and people are not wearing masks. I mean, I know when you eat, you have to take it off, but then just don't call for service, you know, to your table, because you're exposing them. And that's what it pains me to think that for politics or money or whatever, that we are allowing this to happen to these poor people that are, you know, serving and being waiters and waitresses in restaurants. That's my biggest beef. So I'm sorry to be on a soapbox, but I have been really working on this and trying to get clarification from the Department of Health, and I'm not real successful. And, they'll say, well, it's really in there from the original shelter in place ordinance, but it's not there when you read the specific ordinances for restaurants. And so it's not being abided by. I know that.
And I think, and I mentioned this to you, Kathy, I think it's intentionally left vague because A, it's hard to pin down, and B, there'll be opposition the more that it is clarified and restrictive.
Oh,
so
yes.
if you leave it vague, it's on everybody to figure it out, and then you have a mess. And
Right.
that's kind
And
of
that's
what
why
we
I'm
have.
just appealing to the goodness of everybody's heart who goes to the restaurants and they try to protect the staff.
Right. Thank you. That's a really good thought for all of us. So let's go to Kat and then Mark. And then I want to not put you on the spot, Nancy, but I would love to hear what your thoughts are on this. Okay, let's go to Kat and then Mark. Go ahead, Kat.
Hi. So I know a lot has already been put on business owners, but I wonder what if we could somehow tie the behaviors of customers to businesses being able to be open, so that if your customers are not wearing masks and they're not being socially distant, then your business can stay open as long as you're able to guide your customers in appropriate safety measures, I guess.
Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. Enforcement is really up to, in Marina, I think we're the only city that hired a COVID enforcement officer who all they do, this person, all she does is COVID enforcement. So you have a complaint, this business, this person, these people hanging out in the corner, whatever the complaint is, this person, that's her job to deal with it. And imagine turning all of these business owners, especially some who don't speak a lot of English, some of them, into enforcers. And I was talking to the owner of the Otter's Den, the only bar left in town next to Wells Fargo, and they haven't opened yet. And he said, it's going to be crazy expecting people with alcohol in their blood to be following compliance. And then I'm behind the bar and I'm supposed to make sure that when they get out of their seat where they don't need a mask and they walk to the bathroom without their mask, I'm supposed to tell them on their way to the bathroom that they have to wear a mask. And they're playing pool or they're doing whatever. So he's going to do his best to open in a few weeks because he's doing some remodeling, or he's adding a dishwasher behind the bar. He's doing some things to take advantage of the downtime. But he's not looking forward to opening, although he needs to open for business. And that's just a small example, but every business owner is going to have their difficulties policing. And so if I go to a business and I'm offended, I feel unsafe, and I go to the COVID officer and I say this business is not compliant, and the code enforcement officer has to go to the business, it's going to be very messy. Well, we have one COVID officer, we're lucky. Most people don't have any. But then we have all these businesses and all times, all hours of the day. So you can kind of imagine what it's going to be like 2 or 3 weeks from now when a lot of businesses are trying to operate and compliance is all over the map. Mark, go ahead. And then Nancy, if you have anything.
Well, I work at the hospital. I work at Chomp. And so we've been masked now for months, wearing masks at the hospital. And they're uncomfortable. Everybody hates them and doesn't want to do it. But we do wear them because we know the benefits of wearing it. We have no COVID patients right now in our hospital. We haven't had any since April. We've had people test positive, but they go home. They're not hospitalized because they're not sick enough to be in the hospital. And we can see that the masking is working for us because we're seeing less and less get tested in Monterey, in our area. It seems like most of the cases are in Salinas. And when you drive into Salinas or you drive anywhere around, you see no masks. You see nobody wearing masks. We go out and we do our shopping on the weekend, and we try and do really quickly, get it done and get in and just kind of divide and conquer a store and get them all done. But you get outside the store and you drive down the street and you just see all these tourists and everything walking around, no masks.
Where is that, Mark?
In everywhere, Monterey, Seaside, Marina, we've seen it everywhere we've been. And it's like, you feel like you're trying to do the best. And we've actually went out, for the first time we went out to actually go to a restaurant and have in Seaside. We went to the Googie Grill in Seaside and we sat down.
That's your first problem.
So we walked in the restaurant and there was a whole family sitting in there and they were like making fun of us because we walked in, we had masks on. And it says right in the building, you must enter with a mask on. And they were from out of the area. They weren't even from this area. And they're like, we heard their conversation. We're just kind of laughing at it because they're like, I can't believe we couldn't go into a store. We couldn't do this because it's all, and it's like, okay, but that's what the rules are and you need to follow them. And that's the thing is are we damned if we tell somebody, hey, you need to wear a mask? Are we going to get into a altercation? Are we going to get into we're shaming them because they're not wearing a mask? But you know what? Here's masks. We have them. And you know what? We use them because we know we have to. And how do we get people that want to come here because they're tired of being in their area and they need to get out and come here? How do we get them to understand that it's our lives that they're endangering, not theirs, it's ours, because they're coming from somewhere else and they may not practice our social distancing and masking. So what's our part in this, and how do we do it as being good citizens in our area to make sure people do it?
Well, first you have to pick your battle very carefully because you could be hurt trying to, especially if there's alcohol or big ego or whatever. I was called today by a doctor. His name was Dr. Choi. Don't call him Dr. Chan. His name is Dr. Choi. I made that mistake. And he basically yelled at me for half an hour because he went into Walmart with the county order in his hand. He was refusing to wear a mask. Walmart tried to make him wear a mask, and he read them the legal act. And so they called the police. 3 police showed up, basically escorted him out the building. And his beef with the police is that they didn't know the law like he did, and they didn't know the order like he did, and he does not need to wear a mask inside Walmart. So imagine if you're an immigrant restaurant owner and Dr. Choi goes into your restaurant. So you're better equipped than some people, but you're taking your safety, you're at risk by trying to assert safety precautions. So you have to be careful about yourself, number one. And number two, you're probably not going to make very much progress with most people because if they're not following precautions, there's probably a reason. And to get people to change into your way of thinking, you're probably 9 out of 10 times not going to make a lot of progress, especially if they're making fun of you, right? I mean,
it's ridiculous because you are adhering to what you know is the best for everybody. And as the saying is, I'm wearing my mask to protect you, you're wearing your mask to protect me. And that's what we all need to live by. And people just, yes, they are uncomfortable. I understand it. But you know what? The only way this is going to go away or get better is by us complying with this.
Right. So I think the safest thing to do is go to grocery outlets where everybody wears a mask and they're really good about it. Go to those restaurants that obviously are doing everything they can and get in and get out. Take care of yourself because you're not going to change the world in these weeks and months ahead to be safe. And I have so many opportunities to go places where I'm safe. I haven't been to Monterey. I'm not going to go to the beaches in Monterey. I'm not going to go to Sacramento and hang out. When I went to Reno last week, I only went to a couple of stores I had to go to, like CVS and Walgreens, and the customers were not wearing masks, but the workers were. And so I was in and out as fast as I could be. And other than that, I was just in a private home the whole time. So I think that we have a lot of opportunities to go to the farmer's market. do things we want to do, but choose them carefully so we're not exposing ourselves more than we want to. That's working out really well for me. It's probably harder if you have children, but still, I think there's so many options of places to take children these days. Take them for walks, take them for hikes, take them swimming in the ocean. I think there's if you're smart about it, I think you can do a lot of what you need to do during this quote shelter in place, which doesn't seem like a very good name for it anymore. Nancy, did you have anything that you wanted to impart to us? Is that a no? Okay, I can't tell if do you want to talk? Oh, great. Okay. So I should have just unmuted you. But go ahead, Nancy.
Okay, thanks. Pretty much my thoughts have already been expressed by the last speaker, but I'm also very concerned about the rise in the numbers in the county. And they seem to be going up, not in a little fashion, but in large fashion, large numbers, 40, 50, 60 new cases. And I would just assume it's directly related to the fact that stores are opening and people are not wearing the masks. And I think that concerns me greatly, as you've just discussed. I don't know why it can't, I don't know why, if it's an educational thing that people are just not wearing them because it's out of ignorance, that they don't understand. And I also wish it could be better enforced. Like we say, we're wearing it out of respect for somebody else. And that just doesn't seem to matter to many, many people. And so I'm concerned because I'm afraid that we're going to retrograde here and if these numbers continue to rise.
Well, it's the dismal situation, along with your thinking, is when Gailey Jablonski called the sheriffs to Pomas Landing because there were a bunch of people that were not social distancing. They were just hanging out, and they weren't wearing masks. They had them, but they weren't wearing them. The sheriff showed up. He drove by and he left. And she found out later that they don't have clear direction how to enforce or how to implement or how to interpret, so they don't. So it's a county order. The sheriff deputies don't enforce it because they don't know how to, because they haven't been given direction. And there might be because there's politics at the top not giving them direction, so that it's not enforced. But if the authorities can't understand or enforce it, then it's really hard for Mark in a restaurant to have that role. And I just want to say, Marina, we have that COVID enforcement operator, and our police chief takes it pretty seriously. So relatively speaking, I see a lot of people in Marina wearing masks, even when they don't have to, when they're just walking around or bicycling. So I think that Marina is a relatively safe place, and you have some means of addressing non-compliance in Marina, maybe because we're a small city, but also because we have a COVID enforcement officer that is pretty aggressive. And those police escorted the guy out of Walmart. So, we have examples of it working when someone tries to ignore what the rest of us are talking about. Okay, well, if anyone wants to talk about that, please raise your hand. If not, we'll move on. So we're already an hour and a half into this, and it's supposed to be an hour. So let's officially end this, but unofficially, I'm going to stay on and talk about tomorrow's City Council agenda, which relates heavily, in my opinion, to Black Lives Matter and to what we're doing out at the airport. We have an environmental impact report to certify, and then we have the whole COVID loan program. Are we doing as much as we can for businesses and residents to give them money to keep them from desperation? And so we're probably going to modify our loan program to make them make those programs more available to people of higher income, because right now you had to be dirt poor to qualify. And if you're not dirt poor, you can still be in desperate straits, but not get our help. And so I think that's going to change tomorrow night. So we'll talk about our agenda. But Sharon, let's give you the last word on the official part of tonight's town hall meeting. Go ahead, Sharon.
Mr. Mayor, I just found all the masking discussion interesting because I was in line at the library this morning and I got yelled at by the National Guardsman for not having a mask on in the car. And I didn't understand, and they said I couldn't get through unless I put a mask on, even though I didn't have my windows rolled down or anything. So there's enforcement there, I guess.
Yeah, so that was the library's food distribution event.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sorry that happened. I don't know. I don't think you're required to wear a mask by yourself in your car, especially with the windows up. Now, during a food distribution event, though, if they're going to open your back door or your trunk to put food in, I have participated in these events, and I'm happy when the driver has a mask on, especially if I'm putting some bags right behind him or her on the back seat behind the driver's seat, which is often the case. We try to go through the trunk to give us more space from the driver, but I do appreciate when those drivers have their masks on. But I see your point, and I think that legally, in your car alone with your window up, you don't have to wear your mask. But I can kind of see their perspective too, because they're coming in contact potentially with a lot of people, and they're volunteers. Well, the National Guards are kind of conscripted, but there are volunteers there too. So I can kind of see that one both ways. Can you see it both ways, Sharon?
Yes.
But thank you for joining us. And if you need anything else besides food, if you run into any serious problems with all that's going on, please contact me or somebody at the city, because there's other people who are set up just to help people during COVID. So if you run into any other problems, please know that there's people waiting to help you should you need it, should anyone need it, okay?
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Sharon. Okay, so that'll officially end our town hall meeting, but unofficially, everyone's welcome to stay on. And what I'll do is I normally do on these town halls, I run through the agenda and then open it up to comment along the way. So good night to those of you that are respectfully leaving us. And for those that are sticking around, we start at 6:30 tomorrow night, and it's going to be a long meeting. I can see it going till 10:30 or later. We talk about in closed session at 5 o'clock, we talk about labor negotiations with the police and the firefighters, very germane to Black Lives Matter and defunding police and all of that. So we'll be going into labor negotiations in closed session. And then we're going to talk about real property negotiations going on at the airport with Joby Aviation, the ones that are building those air taxis. And there's ongoing issues, and we'll be addressing those. And then Skydive Monterey Bay has some price and terms that they want to negotiate with us on their property to keep running their skydive business. And then after that discussion in closed session, it will be 6:30, and we'll come to open session at 6:30, have the Pledge of Allegiance. And then it's kind of neat, we're going to have a Civil Disobedience Day proclamation, encouraging people to be civilly disobedient and appreciating those people around the world and the country and locally that have been expressing their rights of disobedience. And around here, they've been very peaceful. No bricks through windows, that kind of thing. But anyway, we'll have that proclamation read. And then we have a Pride Month proclamation for the LGBTQ community. And that will be read by Lisa Berkeley, our city council person, who asked if she could read it, which is just honoring those transgender, gay, and non-traditional folks in that way. And so that's good. That's a good way to start it off with civil disobedience and Pride Month proclamations. And then we'll have some recreation announcements from our esteemed director of our Cultural Recreation Services, Terry Segrist. He always does a really good job. And that'll probably include information about our food distribution events that Sharon was just speaking to. And then we turn it over to the public rather quickly. Special announcements, anything that's on your mind, such as Sharon's comments or other comments we've heard today, all the things we've talked about today would be the appropriate time to discuss during this special announcements and communications from the floor. What's not okay to talk about at this point are things that are on the agenda later that night. Then you'll have a chance to talk about each of those as they come up. And then we move into our consent agenda. which is a bunch of stuff that we put into a group and we approve them all at once, past minutes of meetings. We're going to deny a claim for $2 million. Somebody's claiming that we should pay them $2 million for something that we really don't have much to do with. It's a Fort Ord Use Authority matter on Fort Ord, on property that is not marina property. So it's those kinds of claims that we just have to officially deny, and then they get sent to down the road to a consultant that does our denied claims. But we have to officially deny them to move them on to the next step. And then something that most of you would be interested to know is we're going to send out to bid under our consent agenda Reservation Road to be rehabilitated as basically a pavement overlay. We fixed all the potholes during the wet season, but you can't repave during the wet season. So now that things have dried out, Reservation Road between Salinas Avenue all the way to Imjin Parkway, that long stretch of Reservation Road, which is the nasty stretch, it's been patched, but it's still kind of rough. But that'll be looking pretty nice, and they're going to come up with a green way of doing it where they crunch up the existing asphalt, heat it up, and then reapply it instead of putting it in a truck, trucking it to the landfill, and then starting from scratch with brand new asphalt. So it's an asphalt conservation technique that will be bid out. So we're saying, here's a technique we want. It's green. It saves us money. It saves the environment. It gives us just as good of a 20-year product as if we were to use new asphalt. So who wants to bid on it? So those bids will go out after tomorrow night if this is approved, and I suspect it will be. Also on the consent, we have actually four landscape districts, if you include Loch Padden, which is not the park, but across from the park, those new developments that have been there about 10 years at the southwest corner, across the street from Burger King, but the southwest corner of Reservation Road and Del Monte intersection is a Loch Padden community facilities district. So there's four districts that will be approved for their special assessments to go one more year. Every year we do this, 1 year at a time. And then we'll be sending on to the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, a $30,000 grant request that the government's putting out $1 trillion of federal money for airports. And the pro rata amount, when you get down to Marina, it's $30K. But City Council has to apply for the $30K. And if we apply, we automatically get it. And that can be used for anything that we do at the airport that's authorized by the federal government to be done at airports. And that kind of rounds out the consent agenda. And then we move into public hearings. And the first one is going to take a little while because it regards a few hundred pages of airport master plans and specific plan documents, including an EIR, environmental impact report. So we'll be talking about the airport plans. The UC is part of the airport. They have 75 acres. We have 75 acres. The 150 cumulative acres are for business parks, education, light industry, manufacturing, pretty much the whole gamut. But none of that can happen before approving these documents tomorrow that have been in the works. Don't laugh, but they've been in the works since about 2006. So just a short 14 years. And we're at that point of giving them the thumbs up so that the airport developments can start to happen when we have willing developers out there. And then we do something that's dear to my heart, but it'll be very brief, and that is to send to the voters on November 3rd, 2020, an extension to our urban growth boundary. Some people may not understand that we have the only urban growth boundary in the county history that's ever been attempted. And it was attempted back in the year 2000, and it was approved by the voters, a 52 to 47% margin. But that was the voters turning City Hall upside down because City Hall Power Center wanted nothing to do with an urban growth boundary. The Power Center of Marina at that time, starting in 1999, wanted 3,500 large new homes to go in between Beach Road and the landfill. At that time was all grassland being grazed by cattle. And it had to be annexed into the city because it's outside of the city. And so this urban growth boundary said, no, 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 there's a line in the sand. If you approve this urban growth boundary, beyond which you cannot subdivide less than 40 acres per parcel. you don't make a lot of money on 40-acre parcels. And so landowners don't want to develop until they can subdivide down to, maybe 6 or 2 houses per acre, whatever makes up the most amount of money. So the voters spoke in 2000, and ever since then, we've been doing the only game in town on former Fort Ord, trying to get rid of blight and redevelop blighted areas instead of developing anew on virgin open space, leapfrogging the town center and the blight on Fort Ord. That didn't happen because of this urban growth boundary, but it was a 20-year urban growth boundary, expires this year, 2020. And so it was a voter initiative to continue it. We need to go back to the voters. We could do it by city council, but then a future city council could undo it. By going to the voters, it requires voters to change it. And so it worked very well for 20 years. We still have a lot of Fort Ord left to develop and a lot of blight left to remove. And the beauty of this is it gives the future generations that open space north of town, and the future generations won't be saddled with the very costly and difficult process of demolishing blight and redeveloping very expensive property on Fort Ord. Rather, the future generations will decide, do they want open space north of town, or do they want development north of town? And if they want development, they can have it. And it probably won't be the same kind of development that we would have chosen back in 2000 or even today. So one, it gives future younger generations the choice of what to do with that land, open space or develop. And if they choose to develop, it'll be their way and not our way. Our way is to get rid of what past generations created, that mess on Fort Ord. And it's being turned into some very good developments there. So I think we're going on the right track. And this will be sort of a icing on the cake, or a new icing on the cake, just to say, let's do this another 20 years, this Marina urban growth boundary. So that'll be an initiative on the ballot, and Land Watch is going to be helping us, people like me, who want to go door to door to get people to say yes on this ballot initiative. It's not over until it's over, so this just gets it on the ballot, and then there'll be some effort made to get people to say yes, and Land Watch, who helped us back in 2000, will be helping us in 2020 to see this hopefully get passed. So that's the second and last public hearing, and then we go to the action items. And the first one is administerial establishing appropriations limit, which says we can't spend as a city more than $28 million, but we're talking about $22 million. So that's our cap, 28 million, and so it's a no-brainer. It doesn't matter. We're not even close to it. So that'll be very quick. What won't be quick are the two next items. The first one is something I hope that we get a lot of public input about, and that is, how do we spend our next 28 million? We could spend that 28 million as if Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, and all these protests never happened. The budget before us, given to us by staff, was produced before George Floyd was murdered. And so it's not a creative budget in the direction of George Floyd or Black Lives Matter, but it's a balanced budget. And it takes us from $12 million in the bank to $8 million in the bank. So we will use $4 million because we're going to be losing $4 million due to COVID. So if we approve it the way it is now, we'll spend down our 12 million in the bank to be 8 million left June 30th, 2021. So a year from now, we'll have 8 million in the bank instead of 12 if we don't get creative. And we just sort of rubber stamp what staff has prepared for us prior to the George Floyd Black Lives Matter situation. I think there's an opportunity to respect what's going on and give some money to the food bank, because defunding police sort of means taking care of people better. So giving money to the food bank, given that they're giving us so much food every Tuesday and Friday, and giving money to pay someone to look at institutional racism that may or may not exist in the city of Marina, at City Hall and in our various departments and on City Council, spending money to find institutional racism and do something about it with recommendations. It's something we could do but don't have to do tomorrow night. And then Adam Urrutia came up with some ideas. One of them is that it's fairly likely that there's going to be a statewide initiative that's going to pass. And if it passes, it's going to give all cities a lot of money. Marina would get $2 million. And so Adam is saying, let's not make any cuts and stop positions from being hired, because really we're being so conservative that we're ignoring $2 million that likely is going to come. And so whether or not we spend money assuming that $2 million is coming, let's say that we don't. Well, in 6 months after November election, if that does pass the way that it's expected to, we can decide what to do with that $2 million at that time, or we can assume it's coming and proceed accordingly tomorrow night. So we'll see, but that'll be something in our discussion. And why I'm hoping that people show up and speak is because maybe people want more parks to have restrooms. Maybe people want the existing restrooms to be remodeled so that they're more modernized. Maybe people want better restroom maintenance, which is more expensive, more frequently done. Longer restroom hours, not only for the homeless, but for families and everybody else that go to our parks. Maybe people want the equestrian center to be built faster as far as its improvement so that more people besides just equestrians can use it. Maybe people want a pump track to be fast tracked so that there's a COVID safe activity that children can do at Gloria Jean Tate Park across the street from Denny's. Maybe there's a lot of ideas that people want done that we won't hear unless they show up tomorrow. But there's no magic to having $8 million left in the bank when today we have $12 million. There's no magic to not spending $200,000 or $300,000 to get something done that the populace thinks is important, especially if it relates to Black lives or institutional racism. I'm sorry about the noise in my background. My dog is playing tug of war with herself and making a lot of noise. So that's it on the budget. And then we go into COVID, where we have been trying to get to this item, but we keep running out of time, and we might again run out of time before we get to COVID tomorrow night. But that is to look at what we've been loaning to businesses and residents, acknowledge that few residents have applied, not very many businesses have applied, acknowledge that we haven't spent all the money that we set aside to give as loans. And so the proposal is to increase the amount of money that businesses can make and still qualify for these loans, and anything else that people want to talk about related to COVID as far as enforcement, the new businesses that are being opened, allowed to open. So kind of everything wrapped into COVID is going to be up for discussion as long as we have time. And then if that's not enough, we've been trying to pass abatement on business license penalties. So if you can't pay your business taxes to the city on time because of COVID, we don't want you to have fines and penalties. But for you not to have fines and penalties, the council has to approve no fines or penalties through October 31st. So if we want to not penalize businesses at some agenda, we need to say that we adopt this resolution. I'm not sure why we haven't put this on the consent agenda, probably because the city manager doesn't know if the city council is in favor of this or not, which I think they will be. And that's kind of it for the real stuff. And then we have housekeeping items, as we always do, a report by me on the Mayor's Association that meets twice a month now, and then for any council or staff to make a clarification or a brief report on what they've been doing or ask questions. And then we have a proclamation of local emergency update. And I don't know what that's about, but I think it's just something that we do every now and then during this COVID situation. So that's a very long agenda, and it's like this every week. We have longer agendas than we have time for, because some of us want to go to bed before 11:30, so we normally don't go past 11. And it's like pulling teeth to get to 11 o'clock, because there are some people that don't want to go to 11. But if there's something still important to do, we'll likely go until 11, I think. But we're supposed to end by 10 o'clock. Karen, you missed most of this, so I'm going to bring you back in. So Karen, I'm going to turn it over to Lisbeth to tell you what I said the last 15 minutes when you were probably gone. But I'm going to unmute you all because I just finished talking a lot. And why don't we end this meeting by hearing from any or all of you about what you think about tomorrow's agenda, and if there's anything that you want to say. You're all unmuted, except on your end, you'll have to push unmute. But go ahead.
Tues, you might have unmuted only me because I'm the only one unmuted. And
No,
I didn't
Audra's
do anything.
unmuted
Might
too.
be you. But I do have a practical question. I know that, you know, I'm always laughing when, well, I shouldn't say that, but it's
true.
when the city council meeting, you know, when a motion is being made to extend the meeting by 10 minutes, 5 minutes. I mean, just say, can you say, or are you afraid that people won't accept it if you just say, let's extend till 11? Because I'm just in stitches here every time. Jules is upstairs and he's like, oh yeah, I said it's number 6 now. Okay, so just a strategy that you're using. Okay, but for a more serious thing, if I'm correct, the unemployment, the extra $600 a week that people are getting will end at the end of July. Is that true?
Yep, that is true, unless it's extended, which I doubt it will be.
And the moratorium on rents?
That goes until, I think that's the end of July too.
As well, I think.
Yeah.
I'm so scared for so many people when July 31st comes. And I don't know if the city is, you know, if there's still extra money, it might be wise to hold on to some of it, because residents, I mean, if they need to pay their rent and they still don't, and they don't get their extra money every week anymore,
So one comment that could be made tomorrow night is, with these looming deadlines, we should start to plan on helping people so that we don't wait for the deadlines to happen, desperation to ensue, and then we start talking about it. So I think it would be very wise to say, you know it's coming, these deadlines. You know that desperation might accompany these deadlines. So let's get ahead of it and have a plan rather than not have a plan, and have some money, have this discussion in the next couple of months, the next few weeks, about how much money we can put toward this contingency, because it's going to take money to help people.
And it's probably only 6 weeks away. So it's scary.
Tomorrow night is the night to talk about it.
Yes, and I might not be here.
You don't have to be. You could be in Tahiti and you could still join us.
Sorry?
You could be in Tahiti and you could still join us.
Yes, I might be in the car. So I'm leaving the county tomorrow for work.
One tap phone. Pull over.
Yeah, I don't know. But if anybody else, I might be back in time to mention it. But otherwise, I hope that somebody else might speak up.
I think it's important that you calendar your time to not miss this important meeting.
Yeah, I'll try. I think that Kathy wants it. I think you need to unmute all the other ones, Bruce.
They're all unmuted. So
they are? No.
If they're muted, it's because it's on their end. Let's go to Audra.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Ray. So it seems like this is a really important meeting, and honestly, I feel like I pay attention to a lot of things, but I didn't know that this big budget meeting was coming up. And it seems like a lot of residents might not have. Is this an action item? I guess my question is this an action item? Will they be voting and passing it tomorrow, or will there be enough time for the residents to actually have a discussion, ability to learn about the budget, why things are going, how to target it, if we'd like to move things to other places like pump tracks for the kids at Gloria Tate. So thank you.
Yeah, tomorrow's not the last chance, but it's the biggest chance. And the history of this is not a normal budget where every year you do a budget. The history of this is that we're in the middle of a 2-year budget that was passed a year ago, June of 2019, before we had COVID. And it was a 2-year budget, our first 2-year budget. We used to pass 1-year budgets. So we're in the middle of our first ever 2-year budget. And with the pandemic, our budget plans, like everybody else's, have to be modified because we don't have the revenue coming in. Therefore, if we spent what we said we were going to spend, we would be something like $8 million short. And so we're making adjustments so that we're only $4 million short. And we're taking that $4 million out of our savings account, essentially, so that our budget is balanced by taking $4 million out of our savings. We could have taken $8 million out of our savings and not cut or change anything. So this is a COVID response meeting tomorrow. And the budget was put together to respond to COVID before George Floyd was murdered. And so this budget was not intended or created to address what's happened in the last 6 weeks or whenever, May 25th. It's not even been a month yet. So this is not supposed to be a budget where we get creative, but the status of the world is such that I think we should consider getting creative so that we're not with our head in the sand as if nothing has happened except for COVID. Were nothing to have happened but COVID, this is what the budget we have tomorrow proposed. But there's a lot of things we'll be talking about depending on how many people show up. I put it on my Facebook, I put it on Nextdoor in a way that I thought would encourage people to, put Black Lives Matter philosophy to work tomorrow night. Because if we just protest and we don't show up when the money hits the road, then those protests aren't going to get the changes that they need, as far as I can see. Changes cost money, and tomorrow we're talking about money. So I hope that people come up with ideas to help us along. And it's not that we don't have money to spend, because we do. We don't want to be frivolous. I think we still want to be judicious spenders, but there's nothing magic about having $8 million in the bank when you think that we're going to have $2 more million coming after November's ballot initiative passes statewide. Okay, Audra, I hope that helped. Anybody else? Go ahead, Kathy. I think you're in control of your mute.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, so you can hear me now, right?
Yeah.
And Lisbeth, if you don't make it, then I can address that, but it would be nice if you did. And Bruce, I just want to ask if you could please put COVID a little earlier, because it's going to get bumped again. I mean, it's like it's so important and it keeps getting bumped. And it's like would be the now a month later. I wanted to say stuff before, and I have not ever been able to talk about it because it keeps getting bumped. So can we
it can't go before it can't I don't think so. It's not well, I don't know that I was going to say it's not more important than the EIR. We've been waiting 14 years, and UC is really itching to get going, and it's been noticed, and it costs money to notice, and you need a 10-day notice. So we have to have that hearing.
Could you put a time limit? Like we'll do COVID for half an hour or 15 minutes or whatever, just so we can do that. And, and at least that, because then we will talk fast, we will get it done, and it's done. But this bumping, it'll be a month and a half then by the next time that we even get to talk about COVID.
Well, I don't think it's more important than the budget item.
No, it's just that it keeps getting bumped. I mean, that's
because there's.
Well, I'm not saying that one is more important than the other, but one hasn't been heard for a long time. So
because every time we have something that we think is more important, and we know that we usually don't get to everything. So if something is not gotten to, we put them in the order that we think is the best order. But what's everybody else think? Because I can make a pitch to rearrange the agenda. Kathy's shaking her silent head. What do you think, Mike and Cindy? If you're muted, it's on your end. You need your audio video tech. I can see you trying, but it's not working. I'm going to turn on my kitchen light because I'm.
Yeah.
I think the sun is setting. The sun must be setting outside.
Mike, we can reach your lips.
Let's see if I can do anything, Mike. I sure I can't, because you're like everybody else. You're unmuted on my end.
There it goes. It said that the host was preventing me from unmuting myself.
Well, okay, I guess it was on my end. I kept hitting unmute all, but it
Okay,
wasn't
but
working.
anyway, yeah, I'm back now. Yeah, changing the agenda, I can imagine it's probably going to be administrative difficulties. So I guess everyone has their feeling of what's important. You know, I'm not discounting Kathy's concern about the COVID because it is very important. I just don't know you know, what it takes to change a city council agenda at the last minute.
Takes 3 votes. So I'll bring it up, Kathy, and I'll say, hey, everybody, I think that I don't have any comments. I like the proposal. I think it might go very quickly, and we can ask the public to keep that in mind, that we have a lot of things tonight, so we can move through this COVID thing quickly. But it's not so quick because it's not just adjusting the loan program. It's everything related to COVID. So maybe we can separate it out and just deal with the loan program COVID issue, and then leave the rest of the agenda about COVID in its place. So maybe we can divide it a little bit. We'll see. And then it's dividing it. We have to get the city attorney to say that that's legal to do. But so I'll give it a try, Kathy.
Thank you.
And I'll do that before public comment at the start of the meeting. So if I forget, then you can use public comment to say, hey, what about changing the agenda? And I'll say, oh yeah, I forgot. Well, so that'll remind me, but I'll try to do it before public comment so you can save your time on anything else that you might want to say during public comment. All right, well, anyone else want to talk about anything that's on the agenda tomorrow night? I feel like I spill my guts and then you guys don't say anything.
Well, you put us on the spot and we did talk, so you're training us.
Right. Okay, Sharon, I'm going to put you on the spot. Are you still there, Sharon? If you're still there, Sharon, tell us what you think the city should spend money on in deference to what we're hearing at all the Black Lives Matters. Yeah. I'm trying to unmute you. So Sharon, if you hear me, anything that you think we should spend money on, like better restrooms at the parks, do you think we should help the homeless somehow? If you think we should spend money giving more people food, anything like that. And Sharon's not coming back on. So let me ask the rest of you, should we stay the course or should we be spending money in new directions in deference to the defund the police and taking better care of people instead of just enforcing people? Some of my most opinionated associates are not saying anything. I don't get it. Karen, you're trying. Karen, okay, let's work together on this, Karen. It should be on your end because I keep trying. There you go.
Okay, now I can. I have a question because I don't know where all the schools are in this town and where all the houses are in all the neighborhoods, but I live really close to Carmel and I like to walk through a pedestrian gate to another side of town. And I'm wondering if the people who live east of Salinas Avenue or, Bear, where do their children go to school? And does that mean they have to drive all the way around the state that close at that location? Totally off topic, but just wondering about that.
That's what these town halls are for. So all of Preston Park, Abrams Park, Bayer Drive, and Salinas Avenue, they all go to Crumpton Elementary School because it's the closest school. It's our easternmost school, Crumpton Elementary on Carmel Avenue. And then people where I live, Central Marina, more center, go to Marina Vista. And then the only other elementary is all those folks that live near the beach or Walmart where Adam and Frank and Gail live. They all go to Olson School.
Olson. We
only have one middle school. And so most of the parents drive to their kids because most of the kids live far because it's, citywide. It's the only only middle school, and we only have one high school. So a lot of cars go to those two schools, and a lot of people walk to the other schools, although there still is a significant amount of driving to elementary schools too, more than they used to be. And none of those schools are set up for the driving that happens in the 21st century. They were all built when, I don't want to sound sexist, but usually it was mom that was home back in the day when those schools were built, and she was walking the kids to school. But anyway, so we have massive unsafe parking lot jams, and in and out. And then we have people that aren't associated with the schools that are frustrated, and they just race by, and the moms race by to get there, and they race away to get going when they drop their kids off, moms and dads both. And so it's all of the schools complain that it's not a safe situation before and after school, because the schools weren't built to handle all the traffic that they're handling. But that was kind of going on my own tangent to your question. So do you walk through the gate at Marina Vista to get to the front of Marina Vista?
So, well, two things. I did notice earth movers in front of Crumpton, like they might be changing the driveway, but I'm not sure. But no, I'm talking about going the other direction. So for people who live in Preston Park and those neighborhoods whose children are coming to Crumpton, there's a physical gate closing the road, Carmel, between the two areas. So those people have to backtrack out to Reservation Road to come around to the school. And why? Why is that?
Security. It's security. So initially the gate was closed on Carmel, so you couldn't walk from Preston to Carmel Avenue. And then because of this concern that a lot of people shared, they opened the gate to bikes and peds. And then when they started building houses, because there was a big part of Marina Heights where they weren't building houses, and so they had nothing to lose unless people, really did something stupid and sued them. But now they have houses under construction in between Preston and Carmel Avenue. And so now they're really worried from security that you'll have people walking through a construction zone, getting hurt, and suing Sea Haven. So they've reclosed that gate like it used to be closed. And until all the houses are built, they don't plan on reopening it because of liability.
Okay.
The other sad thing is that if you want to walk to the high school from Preston Park, you have to go through Sea Haven, which is legal and open, but it dumps you into the middle of California Avenue. And so now your high school age kids have to cross California with no crosswalk, no help, just get across.
At 40 miles per hour.
It's terrible. It's terrible.
Well, it's Elizabeth's fault because she didn't speak up when they were proposing a higher speed limit.
We can't fix California Avenue so that the high school students can walk that path and get across safely.
Well, we could. It would require a traffic light in the middle of California Avenue. And what the city has said they would do is put a mid-block crossing walk. A mid-block crossing walk has no traffic signal control. It's the middle of a block. And that's really dangerous because the pedestrians think they're safe and the drivers don't expect a mid-block crossing walk. And so the city has basically agreed to put in a crosswalk, but they haven't yet.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Are the mid-block crossing walks, are those the ones that are automatically triggered by the pedestrians standing next to them, or you touch the button and then the lights, like over at the sports center in Monterey or by the middle school in Salinas?
Yeah, it'd be like
really well.
Yeah, it'd be like Windy Hill Park on DeForest Avenue. That's a mid-block.
That one.
It's what you're saying. You push the button and the lights start to flash. Yeah. And then you walk across.
Okay, so that's one of the proposals.
No.
So
But that's perfect for tomorrow night.
For tomorrow, I want to say, because that's dangerous. What are they thinking, Bruce? What are they thinking, really?
Well, they're thinking long-term planning. When Sea Haven is all built, there'll be a controlled intersection, but they're not going to
Forget
put
about
it
the
in.
8 years between now and then.
Well, it was approved in 2004.
Yeah, it still upsets me.
And so for a while, it was closed and you couldn't walk through. It was fenced off. And then when the new streets went in, they opened up the gate because now the streets take you right to California, which is great for a car. Well, it's not great for a car, but it's worse for a high school kid.
But I like Aura's suggestion, and I know in San Jose they also had those. Maybe Aura means the same. They have also the lights in the streets. Everything starts blinking, and it's really good. So that might be a solution.
So the maintenance of lights on the street that get run over is higher cost than lights that are above your head because they're not getting, they're not getting the pressure of traffic. It's all a money issue.
But we have money, I heard.
Well, I said there's nothing magic about having 8 million in the bank. What's magic is that we have 5 million in the bank for our emergency reserves in case we have a crisis. Like we're going through a crisis right now, but we're not using the crisis money. So we have 5 million in the bank that kind of is magic, and that's for earthquakes, pandemics, and floods and stuff like that. But then we have another 3 million on top of the 5 million that we're not planning on using prior to June 30th, 2021. We're planning on going from 12 to 8 and staying at 8. And now we're hearing that we're going to get another 2 million from this ballot measure. So that 8 is going to go up to 10. So even if we were stuck at 8, there's no reason we can't go to 7.5 to do this or do that, or $7 million. It's not, we're not going to look back from 20 years from now and say, gosh, we shouldn't have gone from 8 to 7 like we did to put that traffic light in. We can't do everything, but we can do some things that we're not planning on doing with this COVID budget, which is not a Black Lives Matter budget. Okay, well.
Yeah, and I sent pictures as you suggested to Brian regarding safe traffic pedestrian crossings for Imgen Parkway, and the same is true for that
3rd
one in
Avenue.
California.
I'm sorry.
What both of them, yes, both of them, 3rd Avenue and the next one up, because
4th Avenue.
2.
Okay, so you're talking about
up there.
3rd Avenue at Imgen and 4th Avenue at Imgen, and then we're talking California Avenue in the middle of California.
And
right.
Yeah, I mean, let's do them all at once because we're requiring the same engineering and equipment and stuff we got to buy for it. So make a set of them.
Okay, so here's what's in the agenda packet. It's do we give the homeless shelter money that's in Seaside, $22 grand, $1 per person in Marina? Do we give the food bank money? Do we redeploy proposed cuts in recreation because some recreation people don't have work to do because we don't have events? So that $150,000, do we put it somewhere else to spend money, like on restrooms or parks or some to help the homeless? Do we take $10,000 and give it to the food bank, Monterey County? Do we take $20,000 and hire a consultant to examine our city's practices and eradicate institutional racism? Do we buy the street sweeper or not? That's $220,000. So there's a lot in here that we could do that's not part of the budget proposal. And then there's a lot that's not in here that we've started to talk about the last 10 minutes that's not in here in any fashion. But there's nothing magic about the 8 million. That's what I was saying. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for staying on until almost 9 o'clock. What's that? That's 2.5 hours almost.
Not quite dark.
All right. Well, I hope that you join us tomorrow and that tonight got your conversation going so that you can have lots of comment.